you look for something we call scalable efficiency. In fact, one of the greatest findings in the consulting arena was the Boston Consulting Group that discovered the famous learning curve or experience curve that said the more you do something, the better you get at it. And so they drew this famous curve and said if you produce more and more and more of this stuff, guess what? You can do it cheaper. That was a brilliant insight, apparently, some time ago. There was actually a trouble with that insight that many of us didn't discover for some time, and that is that wonderful curve, that type of learning curve, that type of cost effectiveness curve is a diminishing returns curve. So if you want to know why we're scrambling faster and faster and faster to more or less stay in place, is because basically that diminishing returns curve is driving us crazy. We have to work that much harder to make the same amount of improvement that was so easy to do in the early days. But if you're really going to make scalable efficiency our game, our fundamental competitive strategy, what do you need? You need predictability, you need control, you need hierarchy, you need organizational routines, and of course, we all know the importance of minimizing variance. This makes us all into beautiful machines. And lo and behold, this idea of scalable efficiency maps over to our great education system, where we talk about the factory model of learning. Again, the notion of scalable efficiency, honest to God, did become the fundamental driving force. That meant in a stable world, we could actually predict years in advance the curriculum that our kids would have to be learned or trained and educated in that would make them maybe successful 10, 15 years later, or even 2 years later in the workforce, and so on and so forth. And so basically we went into kind of the whole role of curriculums. We went into the whole notion of standards-based teaching and learning, and we went into the whole notion of authority-based as the basis of this factory model. That worked, more or less. And in fact, in some ways, ideas like this have been around for approximately 300 years. And then, all of a sudden, the game changed. And I'm going to argue that almost all of us here today, because of a fundamental transformation that has happened, that is driving us crazy on one hand, but is also giving us incredible tools to play the new type of game, the new face of learning, not the old face of learning. And that's the fact that basically if you go back and you look at transportation, if you look at the shipping industry before that, if you look at the steam engines before that 300 years ago or 200 years ago and so on and so forth, all these fundamental technological infrastructures, we used to call them techno-economic paradigms, all have the property of an S-curve. There's a period in which they get kind of conceived, and there's a punctuated moment of evolution where they kind of get out in the world, and then once they get installed in the world, we spend 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years figuring out how to adapt our organizational practices, our social practices, our learning practices around this top of the S-curve until something else happens. That, in fact, is the history we have seen for virtually all of civilization. I want to argue that something very fundamental has happened, and that is we have blown up the S-curve and replaced it by an unrelenting exponential curve, driven, of course, originally by Moore's Law, driven by digital technologies, but not just Moore's Law. And this keeps going on and on and on, and change is accelerating. And in fact, now you have this exponential march forward, and you have these little tiny blips that basically change the game almost every year. In my own field of enterprise computer science, etc., guess what's happened? In the last 3 years, I've had to tear up almost everything I learned. I first had to rethink how to do enterprise capabilities in cloud computing. And then the next year, I had to actually open up a Game Boy and look at the graphic processing units and realize that the GPUs were, again, transforming the game. You do not program a GPU anything like you program a CPU. Everything had to be relearned again. And then about 3 weeks ago, I got handed, it's called a very fancy name, an adiabatic quantum computer, which even the notion of an algorithm now is being blown up. So in my own world, I've had have to kind of relearn the fundamentals of computer science 3 times in about 4 or 5 years. This could be fun, but are we prepared for this kind of thing? My point is, this is not just a period. This is where we see things going for the next 20 to 30 years. Our institutions are not prepared for it, and our theories of learning and training are not prepared for it. Our challenge is how to actually take the tools being made available to us and thrive in this ever-changing world.